I was an 11-year-old boy walking home from school around 4 p.m. I was on an empty road about 5 minutes away from my house. There are a few houses around and a couple of alleyways. As I was walking, a 19-year-old guy in a black hoodie was walking behind me. He asked me, "Excuse me, are there any alleyways around here?" I was a dumb 11-year-old and didn't see this as a suspicious question. I thought maybe he'd use it as a landmark so he could remember where he was going. I pointed one out that was very close by and continued trudging along. About 10 seconds later, I felt an explosion of pain in the back of my head and was grabbed and frog marched towards the alley. I realized he had sucker punched me, and even as I was being frog marched, I remembered thinking this must be some kind of joke. We got to the alley. I was sobbing a bit here, and he must have wanted to shut me up, so he pinned me against the fence, grabbed my head, put it against the stone post, drew it back and told me to, "Just close your eyes." He then shoved my head towards the stone pillar in an attempt to knock me out. Luckily, I threw my hand in front of my head to cushion the blow, and I wasn't hurt. He probably watched too many movies and thought that would knock me out, instead of causing brain damage. He then decided that this was getting too risky. He simply walked away and I ran back home. The police were called, and the last I heard he tried to do it again with someone else, except this time the child's father saw him do it and sat on him until the police arrived. This happened nearly 10 years ago, and I've never been able to forget it. It was mid-July and I was out for a run. Important context, the path I usually took, with some variations, ran through a large public park, but the way back to the house allowed me to take a shortcut through a smaller, non-connected park if I deviated from the main road and passed through a neighborhood. I usually didn't bother taking that route, but this particular day, I was a little uneasy because a car was circling around the big park with some jerks leering and calling at me. Wanting to avoid the main road, I cut through the neighborhood and entered the small park. It was pretty empty, which was kind of odd for that time of year. As I was walking down the path to pass the playground, I noticed two people heading towards me. A man who seemed like he was maybe in his mid-30s, and a girl no older than 14 or 15. They didn't seem like they were together, but they were close enough that I wasn't completely sure. The girl was wearing a bright pink shirt and was holding a skateboard under her arm. As I went past them, they spread out a little more, and I had to pass between them. The man nodded at me, but the girl didn't even glance at me. Something about this whole situation set off alarm bells, but I assumed that I was just being paranoid because of my earlier run-in with those jerks at the big park. Still, I paused my music, but left my headphones in. I passed through the parking lot and made it to the sidewalk that led to the pedestrian street crossing that would eventually lead me home. The sidewalk was shaded by a bunch of trees, and I was avoiding some larger branches and twigs that had fallen during the recent storm. Then, as the crosswalk came into view, I shit you not, a branch snapped behind me. I turned and looked behind me, and the girl was sprinting towards me, skateboard held over her head like a bat. I didn't even think, I just took off, made it to the crosswalk, and stupidly, I stopped there, staring at her. We made eye contact and her face was completely blank. She lowered the skateboard, took another second to stare at me before turning and walking back into the park. I had booked it home and I didn't run again for the rest of the summer, though I never told my family why. For the rest of the time I lived in that area, I avoided that park unless I was with a group of people. I never saw that girl again. This story is 100% true and has always creeped me out. I think about it a lot. About 3 years ago, I was out for a late night walk at the park that was about 2 blocks away from where I lived at the time. It was a pretty safe neighborhood, so I often felt comfortable walking around alone during these late hours. I remember it being 3:30 in the morning. Don't ask me why I was out so late or walking around during this time. Let's just say I was going through some stuff. In hindsight, I know it wasn't smart, especially as a young woman. Anyway, I approached the park, which was lined with large bushes. There's also a street next to the park, and on the other side of the street, a large grassy field. Suddenly, I spotted a bald man carrying large objects wrapped in black plastic. He had on blue surgical gloves and a long plastic jacket. He seemed to be transporting these bag items across the street from the park and into the field. I stopped and watched for a moment. As he began crossing the street with more bagged items, he stopped when he saw me and ran towards the bushes. He stuffed the bag into the bushes and hid them. I could see him clearly, and the whole situation gave me bad vibes. I quickly turned around and started walking back home. I glanced back, making sure he wasn't following me, and I saw his bald head peering over the bushes, staring at me. I started speed walking, and when I was a block away, I saw him sprint across the street and hide behind a large tree. Again, all I could see was his bald head peering around the side of the tree, staring at me. By this point, my heart was racing, but I kept walking quickly. I didn't want to run because I didn't want him to know I could see him following me. My thought process was, if a lion is stalking you, it's not a good idea to run because they'll start chasing you. I just focused on staying calm and getting home safely. Finally, I reached my house and locked both the front and back doors. I tried to shake off what happened and go to sleep. The next day was completely normal. I decided to walk to the park in daylight when there were a lot of people around, and I checked the bushes to see if he left anything behind. Nothing. I decided not to go on any more late night walks after that incident. Even though nothing happened to me, it was creepy, and I realized it could have turned into a bad situation. You never know what someone's capable of. It definitely seemed like I caught him doing something suspicious. Later that night, I sat down to watch a movie. While I was watching the movie, I got up to grab a glass of water. My kitchen window is next to the sink with a view of my backyard, and I always kept the kitchen lights off at night so I could keep an eye on the yard without anyone being able to see me. When I looked into my backyard, to my surprise, I saw him standing in the middle of my yard, just staring at my house. I knew it was him because even in the dark, I could make out his pale, bald head. I immediately cracked open the window and yelled, "Hey!" He took off running, leaving the gate to my fence wide open. Since then, I haven't seen the man again. I still have no idea what he was doing that night or what his intentions were following me home and stalking my house, but I don't think I want to know. I'm a female. At the time this encounter occurred, I was 19 years old and I just closed the store I was working at with another coworker. They drove me home, and since I lived right across the street that they dropped me off at, I thought it was a safe walk home alone. After all, it's a 2-minute walk to my apartment. The apartment I lived in had an auto shop below the building, which my uncle owned. This is important, trust me. It was around 9:30 at night, so it was pretty dark out, and the roads were empty. Not even 10 seconds after I walked across the street, a dark blue minivan pulls up behind me out of nowhere. This kind of startled me, so I looked at the driver in confusion. I was carrying some bags of stuff I brought to work, and the guy driving the van noticed and asked me if I needed a ride. I kindly declined his offer and just told him I live a few minutes away, and I started to continue walking. The guy started slowly following me and continued, "Are you sure you don't need a ride? I don't mind." And again, I declined and continued to keep walking. But he was persistent, and this started to creep me out. So I started walking faster and ignored him as he repeatedly said things like, "Come on, get in the car. Get in the car. Come on, get in." I was afraid to run inside my apartment because I really didn't want this creep to know where I lived, so I was just going to loop back around the building to lose him. Thankfully, I noticed that the auto shop's lights were on and the garage door was open. My uncle must have been working late in the shop, so I sped walked towards the open garage, and the van sped off in a hurry as soon as they were about to pass the open garage door. I told my uncle what just happened and waited a few minutes before walking out to get to my apartment. I locked all my doors and windows and stayed in the living room until my dad came home from our cousin's house. Thankfully, I never saw the van again. I did finally buy some pepper spray after the incident. I usually always have my weighted pocket knife with me, but I had actually left it home that day, using it to cut through thick string for some craft I was working on. To everyone, even if you only have a 2-minute walk to get to your destination and you think you're safe, please treat it like a 20-minute walk home at night. Always be on high guard and continue with caution when going anywhere alone. I grew up in a very small town next to the Mexican border in America. My family had always taught me about being cautious of human traffickers or drug traffickers in the area because of recent cases. Not quite sure if that's important to the story, but it definitely helped with how I acted. My best friend and I, who were both 14 at the time and in high school, decided to take a walk in a nearby park. It was a popular park and was within walking distance from both of our houses, so off we went. As we were walking around and talking, a grown man, maybe in his 40s, came up to us. He said he was new to this town and didn't know where anything was. My friend and I both gave each other a look of slight nervousness, but kept our cool. We didn't engage him much in the conversation, but it was getting more and more uncomfortable. He asked if we went to the local middle school down the street, and I said no, we're high schoolers, but didn't mention which one. It already bothered me that a grown man wanted to talk to who he thought was a middle school kid. Then I noticed something and gave my friend a signal with my eyes. There was another man behind us, also following us. I wouldn't have even noticed him if the guy talking to us didn't give him a smile when I confirmed that we were underage. This man kept his head down when I looked back and wore a hat, seemingly to hide his face. As we walked around the park and the first guy kept asking questions, the second guy didn't stray too far and didn't even try to act as though he wasn't following us. This was getting too much for me. The first man's questions were either about our small town or about our lives in the town. Nothing too invasive until he asked for our phone numbers. This was almost 10 years ago, and even though smartphones were a thing, I had a flip phone. We were broke teens. My friend claimed that she didn't have a phone. I can't remember if this was true or not, but I do remember knowing I couldn't pull the same sentence due to being on my phone, fiddling with it. It was a flip phone, so there wasn't much I could do on it in the first place. So I just admitted that I'd rather not give out my number. He started telling me things like, "Oh, come on, why not? You girls can show me around." Things like that. I explained that I had limited text and minutes, so I didn't give out my number easily. This is when I noticed how dark it was getting outside. His questions kept us stuck in the park till dark because we were too scared to try to walk home out of the fairly popular park where there were other people who we could run to if worse comes to worse. These guys were much bigger than us, and we didn't find anyone we knew. I knew we couldn't keep delaying, so I just bit the bullet. I told him it was getting dark and we started heading home, then directed my friend towards the edge of the park to our houses, but that didn't stop him. He followed after saying that he could drive us home and we wouldn't have to walk. I lied and claimed that we were just down the block. It was really about 5 very long blocks away. Google says it's a 20-minute walk. He claimed to be, "Wouldn't feel right letting 2 young girls walk home alone." And then he pointed to the nearby parking lot saying, "Look, my car's not too far. Let me just drive you home." At that moment, I noticed the second man following us was suddenly only 2 or 3 steps behind us instead of the distance he had been at. Nope, not dealing with this. I said it's faster if we just walk, then quickly said bye, "Nice to meet you," and sped off. My mom had always taught me to be polite, and looking back, I wish she hadn't. Ladies, please don't be polite to men that creep you out. I was too young, but if this happens now, I wouldn't be so polite. Anyway, my friend and I sped across the street, only to see both men hurry to the parking lot. I didn't think much about them hurrying away, only feeling the rush of relief that they weren't following us anymore. The relief, however, was shortly lived. We were on the left side of the road. While walking, we noticed a van turn onto the street on the right side of the road. It was freaking them. They were obviously on the opposite side of the road, but they were hardcore staring at us as they drove by, only to do a sharp turn at the end of the block. Feeling a bit weary, we decided to cross the street just in case. It was the right decision. They came right back to the road. Luckily this time we were on the right side of the street and they were on the left side. Luckily these streets were pretty big, so they couldn't just drive to the opposite side. More stairs as they drove past, only to do another sharp turn at the end of the block. There was nothing for us to do in the middle of this long block except for hide and hope for the best. We ducked behind a car parked in someone's driveway and waited. An old lady spotted us and seemed suspicious, but didn't say a word. She watched the street as well, and there went the same van. We couldn't see them at our angle, but we knew it was the van. The van drove by much slower. We felt like it was taking forever for them to clear out the block. "They left. You should be good," said the old lady. We thanked her, then ran towards where we lived. My friend lived closer than me, so I made sure she was home. I then ran all the way to my house nonstop. I kept my eye on the street for vans, but they either lost us or gave up. I've still never been more scared than the moment I had to run 2 blocks home at night by myself. This happened shortly before weed was legalized in Germany. In Berlin, regulation was already quite loose. As long as you didn't bother anyone, you usually wouldn't get arrested for smoking in public. I've been smoking daily for years. I know it's not great, but that's besides the point. So I can function pretty well when I'm stoned. However, I almost never smoke in public, partly to avoid trouble, but mostly because I enjoy the comfort of my own home. One late night, around 3 a.m., I was chilling online with friends, ready to call it a day. I wanted to relax with a joint and one of my favorite shows, but unfortunately, I had no snacks left. Determined to end the night with a proper munchie session, I decided to hit up the nearby convenience store. At that hour, only the sketchiest ones are still open, often operating illegally. I grabbed my coat and keys, but stopped short before leaving. Why not add a little joy to this cold walk, I thought, rolling a small joint. I lit it as I stepped outside, braving the freezing breeze. The area I live in is pretty rough, mostly foreign residents, many from Arabic countries. Poor integration has led to the crime and violence being all too common. Even so, I was in good spirits as I strolled towards the flickering neon sign of the convenience store. Just one more intersection to go. A group of men stood at the corner. They looked Middle Eastern, a bit older than me, and watched me as I walked by. It felt normal, nothing to worry about, I thought, already a little high. I crossed the street without giving them much thought. Then I heard a voice call out, "Routine ID check. Please show me your identification." My heart sank. Of course, this happened to me the one time I smoked in public, I thought, turning to the police. Only they weren't police. It was the group from the intersection, now slowly approaching me. "Routine ID check. Please show me your ID. We're undercover cops," one of them said with a smug grin. I froze. The fact that they weren't cops became clear when, despite their demand, none of them reached for any identification. "You know smoking weed is illegal, don't you?" the man continued. His pupils were enormous, like saucers. It was obvious that these guys had no authority whatsoever. They began to circle me. "Show us what's in your pockets," the leader demanded. So it's a robbery, I thought. As long as I don't resist, maybe I'll only lose my phone and a few bills I brought for snacks. Then a wave of dread hit me. My weekly tips, about $300 in cash, were also in my pocket. I had forgotten to deposit it earlier. Losing that money would crush my tight budget for the month. What now? As I slowly reached into my pocket, the leader pressed me. What's taking so long? I pulled out an old pack of gum and some broken headphones, hoping to satisfy them. Where's your wallet? I need your ID, he insisted. Still fumbling, too stubborn and too stupid to hand them my tips, I inadvertently revealed something that shocked even me. The glint of the Glock tucked into his belt. Knives and metal rods are typical weapons here, but a gun? That was insane, even by my local standards. German gun laws are incredibly strict. My adrenaline spiked. Slowly, I pulled out €5 that I had planned to use for snacks, trying to keep my expression neutral. You've got no wallet? He basically growled at me, his face darkening. My brain screamed at me to do something, anything, before this escalated further. Then, a desperate thought flashed through my mind. The Arabs in this area had a well-known fear of Russians, with frequent clashes between the two groups. Maybe, just maybe, I could use this. In a heavy Russian accent, I stammered, My friends have my wallet. They're coming soon. We meet here. To my surprise, their poor English comprehension worked in my favor. They exchanged glances, muttered in German, and decided to wait. I forced myself to look confused, maintaining the bluff. It worked. Their effort to translate or figure me out must have seemed like too much trouble. Their leader finally pointed at my €5. Alright then, you get us something to drink. Reluctantly, I followed them into the convenience store. They grabbed a 6-pack of Coke, and I paid, heart pounding. I was certain this wasn't over. They'd either search me themselves or retaliate when my non-existent friends didn't show up. But then, just like that, they left. No violence, no further questions, nothing. I stood there in shock, unable to process what just happened. Looking back, I can't believe I bluffed in such a dangerous situation. It could have been my last day on Earth, all over €300. I've learned my lesson. These days, I avoid walking around late at night when the streets are empty. And to those guys from that night, let's not meet again, ever.